Hi guys, and welcome to Sensory Quest, where we review toys and gadgets for kids of all needs and abilities, as inspired by my daughter Elena, who is deafblind. The Atom Rattle and Teether Grasping Activity Baby Toy by Manhattan Toy. This toy is great for newborns until about 5 years of age. It's made out of a combination of rubber, hard and flexible plastic, so the ball in the middle is made out of rubber, as are sort of these stems and end points, and the hard plastic is for the rings around. For washing purposes, you should only hand wash this, so with a cloth in the sink under running water. Just make sure you don't put this in the dishwasher. You don't try to boil or steam clean this, just because the hard plastic parts will melt. Now, whether your baby has partial vision or just full vision, the bright colors will definitely capture their attention and will help develop whatever vision they do have. In Elena's case, her vision is not the greatest, but she still loved to manipulate the rings around each stem, and even the stem themselves, because they're quite flexible. So even at the beginning, when she didn't have a lot of strength, just putting her mouth on this would kind of move it around a bit, and while she would be mouthing on one end, she could sort of interact with these little rings, and that was really exciting for her. Now, if your child does have hearing, they will also enjoy the soft rattling sound of the rings, which is a great lesson in cause and effect as well. So now they don't have to shake it to hear it. I feel like even when they're sort of eating on one part, just by the fact that they're kind of moving it around, you'll hear these rings move all the time, and so they'll be able to hear that sound pretty much all the time. Now, the ends of the stems are made from durable rubber, so they work great for teething, and I found that they're actually way more durable than most other teething toys. However, in our case, because they were so durable, it worked better for Elena when she had some teeth, so not quite at the beginning when all she had were a bunch of sore gums. But as you can tell, they can take quite a beating. Like, she had her favorites, obviously, and she got her little teeth in here and chewed and chewed and chewed, and we've had this, she's almost 19 months now, and although she's obviously not into this as much, she went at this for a month, and most of these are perfectly in perfect condition, and even the ones that she went crazy on, no pieces fell off. She didn't end up swallowing any of the rubber, so for that alone it was great, because some other toys, if she goes really crazy at it, the little pieces can kind of come off, and some of the coloring can come off, and so you kind of wonder, what are these things made of? But this little guy, super durable, and for us it was wonderful. Now, the other awesome thing about it is, and something that we didn't even think about at first, but we discovered unfortunately with other toys, but anyway, in this case, the awesome part is that the stems aren't very long, so it was one of the first toys where she was able to get kind of like the whole piece in her mouth, so obviously not the whole toy, but one of these ends here. So she would get it all in her mouth and suction on it a little bit, and with other toys the problem is that she didn't know where to stop, so she would kind of just keep going and sticking the toy in her mouth, and her gag reflexes would come on. So this was great because the stems aren't very long at all, so your baby can safely put this in their mouths if once they manage to get the whole end point in their mouth. You don't have to worry about it, because they're not going to end up sort of gagging themselves. So from all aspects, this toy is wonderful for mouthing, for teething. The way it's made, it's quite light for what it is. I mean, it's got a lot going on, but it's not that heavy, and it's got a lot of ways for the baby to grasp onto this. It obviously encourages them to reach towards it, and that's really important to help them develop gross motor skills. Now, even if your baby does not have vision, or like Elena has low vision, just because of the way it's made, just by feeling it alone, like if you were to close your eyes and just grab this, it's got so many things happening, and so there's moving pieces, and no matter how you move this around, there's always something to grab onto. So for Elena, this was just absolutely amazing. And we often found her going back to it. I mean, again, as you can tell by how crazy she gnawed on this, she would go back to this all the time. It's great also for just bringing it along with you wherever you go because, you know, it's not that big and it's also pretty light. So now the only thing I will say is that, you know, when they're super little, so this was only an issue, if I can even call it that, when she was super tiny, so let's say 2 months, a month. Because she was quite small, when she would try to eat on one of these, then one of these other guys would kind of get in her eye, but not to the point where it's dangerous or where it hurt her, but just where it would kind of annoy her and make us freak out because, you know, new baby, we weren't sure if she's okay, but just something to keep in mind. Obviously, if they're super tiny, as they try to get their face into this, some of these neighboring stems could potentially poke them a little bit. But super soft, you know, so that's just something to keep an eye out. Although it's not something you can attach to a stroller or a car seat, which for us is quite important because of Elena's sensory issues, we often bring along, you know, backpacks of toys. So anytime she has a favorite or a few favorites, we love the fact that we can attach them to her stroller or anything else just to keep it safe. But obviously in this case, not very doable. I mean, you could tie something around one of these stems and try to hook it to a car seat or to a stroller, but you know, not every toy can be attached to things, and that's fine. She still really loved this, and we still took it wherever we went because it's so light. So the Atom, Rattle, and Teether Grasping Activity Baby Toy by Manhattan Toy gets an Elena score of 10 out of 10. The Winkel Rattle and Sensory Teether Toy by Manhattan Toy. This toy is recommended for newborns until about 2 years of age. It's made out of hard plastic in the center, so this cube here that looks almost like a piece of dice is really hard, and then everything else, all these loops, are made out of soft plastic. It's again one of those hand wash only toys, so you can wipe this down. Not sure about running it under water just because these kind of go through the tube, so water may get in here. But you know, you can do that too if you really want to. Just once again, do not boil, steam clean, or put this in the dishwasher because these little loops will melt right off. Although it's recommended for newborns, this was absolutely gigantic when Elena was that little. It was basically the size of her head and also a bit too heavy for her at that time. So in her case, it became more of a contender closer to 3 months or so. Again, just because of the overall size. I mean, it's just huge. For a newborn, she was so little. So I guess it also depends on how little your newborn is. Maybe in their case it's okay, but for her, like, her entire head was this size, and so this was not, it was not gonna happen. There's a whole lot of these loops going on everywhere, almost like a maze of them, and they're sort of continuously tubing through the centerpiece. So they're great to teeth on from that perspective, aka there's so many of them. Also, you can put this in the refrigerator. It's perfectly safe to refrigerate. So you can get these a little cool in case you want to provide an extra soothing effect for your baby's gums. But I will say the downside to it is that there's nothing really exciting going on. There's a lot of tubes and they're nice to the touch, but for teething purposes, at least in Elena's case, she did prefer things with a little bit more of a texture to them. And if not texture, then at least her preference was to have you know, herself mouthing on one part of a toy and then be able to manipulate the rest of it a little bit. I guess you could mouth on this part and kind of move this around, but it's so bulky that it's just not that easy to move these while holding on to one end, especially for a baby or a small child. So for her, it just didn't offer a lot of excitement. You know, I will always say this, every child is different, but there's just so many other toys out there that have a lot more texture to it that I felt it just, you know, it wasn't that exciting. And also she kind of expected this middle part to move or do something. Now I will say, if your baby does have hearing, there is a bit of a rattling sound. So, you know, that could be entertaining. For her, obviously she can't hear, so that didn't mean anything. And also the other note I would make is that although there is a sound, it's very soft. So unless your baby has perfect hearing, if they only have partial hearing or their hearing is just not that great overall, chances are they won't even really hear that. And see, it doesn't always even start. Anyways, but it is quite soft, so if you want something that your baby can manipulate and, you know, push their face against and not get hurt, it's definitely great for that. It's got some nice colors on it, and it's great for gums, for teething on gums maybe. Not so much once you have a few teeth, but maybe just for the gums part. But again, for us it wasn't that great, too heavy, too bulky, and I also felt like sometimes Elena would get irritated because she would try to mouth on something and then it's so huge and there's just so many tubes that they would just kind of get in her face while she's trying to do something over here. All of this, the rest of the toy would just kind of overtake her entire face, and I felt like she was quite annoyed. So it's definitely something she tried to play with. She mouths everything, so of course this did end up in her mouth, but it was something that she would drop fairly quickly and not give it much attention. So the Winkel Rattle and Sensory Teether by Manhattan Toy gets an Elena score of 4 out of 10. The Whoozit Twist and Scout Rattle by Manhattan Toy. This toy is great for newborns and up. It's made out of both hard plastic and silicone. It's easy to wipe down to clean or wash it in the sink. Now, they didn't mention whether this is dishwasher safe, and I could not find any site that talked about that. So I'm not sure about whether or not you should put it in the dishwasher. I guess you could try in the top shelf of it, but you know, at the end of the day, I wouldn't really risk it. There's no way to get water into this too much. I mean, there's a bit of a hole around these parts, but honestly, I would just put this in the sink and just wash it with a little bit of mild soap, just to be safe. I know it looks like it's quite bulky, but surprisingly, it's pretty lightweight. And the loop design makes it quite easy for little hands to hold and to grasp. It was something that Elena gravitated towards right away. So I would say maybe not newborn, because I'm not sure we had this toy when she was, you know, a month old, but I think by like 2-3 months she was already super into this, and as she grew she just found different ways to play with it. So it was a little big for her when she was 2 months. And at first we thought, wow, this is like huge next to you. But she grew into it fairly quickly, and again, she did find ways, like new ways to interact with it. So it's great right from the start, and you'll be amazed at, you know, how your child figures out what to do with this thing. It's got a lot of vibrant colors, so I just wish that for kids like Elena that only have a small use of their vision, that some of the colors were a bit more like contrasty. I feel like, for example, you know, the yellow and the pink really stand out next to each other, whereas I'm not sure the red and blue really do. Maybe it's a preference, but I feel like there's a lot of sort of repetition in the colors, which is great if your child has perfect vision. Obviously, that's not a problem at all. I just wish that maybe they would have used a bit more contrasting colors for someone like Elena to also get a bit more out of this. However, there's definitely a lot going on here for baby or a toddler to be drawn to, whether they have sight, sound, touch, you know, combination of those things. You know, it easily twists and turns, so again, that encourages the grasping and promotion of gross motor skills. And there's different shapes. You know, you have these silicone teethers here and these little rings that twist around, and they themselves have like a bit of a texture to it. Everything, you know, there's just all sorts of things happening here. So whether you're into the rattling sound, which can also be great if you have hearing, you know, it does make some sound, but it's also very quiet for those of us that don't benefit from the sound of it. And with that, just like I said earlier, it's obviously not going to be one of those noisy rattles that if your child is hard of hearing will hear, but it's great for those of us that don't want something that's super loud, just because we don't get, you know, annoyed by it. Now the other thing is that these little silicone pieces ended up being super awesome, like super awesome for teething. Obviously every child will have their preference. I found that she would either be obsessively going between these two or trying to get at some of the harder pieces. And it's just like a never-ending party with this toy, because especially as a baby and especially with sensory issues, you know, trying to discover new textures and new things is not that easy. But this guy is just, you know, you just turn it around and turn it around and you're constantly discovering new things. It's easier for the child to kind of hold on to it and not lose it, not lose some of these parts, and get something out of it on and on and on. It's definitely a toy she played with the longest. We took this with us everywhere for months, and it was one of her favorite for like forever. It's also easy to attach to practically anything. Again, we're really obsessed with trying to attach things to stuff and bring it along with us. So obviously, you know, just hook it on to anything. It's not a big deal. And again, not very heavy, which again, if it falls on their face, it might hurt a little bit if they're literally a newborn, but we found that they quickly grow into this. Like, I mean, it's got a bit of a weight, but certainly not what we thought when we saw this online. You know, so for what it is and the range of interaction that this can provide any child, whether they are special needs or not, we feel like the weight of this is perfect. I wish more toys were this light, considering all the stuff happening here. So the Whoozit Twist and Scout Rattle by Manhattan Toy gets an Elena score of 10 out of 10. Thanks so much for watching, and if you guys enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and watch out for more content coming soon.